Welcome to A Day in Analytics. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at how to quickly analyze data by creating pivot tables. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. So first off, what are pivot tables? Well, pivot tables are powerful tools in spreadsheets that allow you to reorganize and summarize data. Instead of manually sorting and calculating or using individual Excel functions, for example, you can use pivot tables to instantly see patterns and trends in your data. So in this spreadsheet, I have some data that I've gotten from Kaggle.com. It's a movie list data set. And what we have is a list of movies categorized by the year they were made, their maturity rating, run length, genre, release date, rating, number of ratings, number of raters. And what we're going to do is we're going to see how we can quickly extract some insights from the data without using individual Excel functions, right? And I'm just going to link to the data set in the description below. So feel free to download and follow along as you'd like. So how exactly are we going to get a pivot table out of this? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to select the data that will be in the pivot table, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we just need to left click on the first column and just drag all the way to the end. And this is a very great approach for selecting data, except if you have some data you don't want to include at the bottom of your data set. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So I'm just going to click here and I'm going to press Command and the down arrow key to get to the bottom of my data set. It'll be Control and the down key for our Windows users. And as you'll notice, I've added to this data set, I've just created some fake data in here, which just says this is fake data. And I did this just so that I could demonstrate to you how you would go about remedying the issue where there's data you don't want included connected to your data set. So what you first want to do is you just want to click the very first cell and you want to click the corresponding number for the first row of the data you don't want. Just a left click is good, and a right click, and then we'll just left click on insert, and that will insert a new blank row that partitions the data that you want to keep from the data that you don't want to keep. So I'll just click the bottom here and I'll press Command and the up arrow key to get to the top of my data set. That'll be Control up for the Windows users, and I'm going to just select all the data to the right, so that'll be Command Shift and the right arrow key, Control Shift and the right arrow key for the Windows users, and Command Shift and the down arrow key for Mac users, which will be Control Shift down for the Windows users. And as you can see, we have successfully selected just the data that we want in our pivot tables. So in our Excel ribbon up top, we're just going to go ahead and click on Insert. So for most of you, you'll be in the Home tab, but we'll just click on Insert and we'll click on Pivot Table. A pop-up will appear requiring some more information. And this is basically just Excel asking you if you want to select a table or a range of cells, which is what we're doing. Or if you want to get the data from an external data source, such as a SQL Server database or a Microsoft Access database. But that's not really relevant to us in this video, so we'll just leave it as it's selected. Next up, Excel wants to know, would you like to have the pivot table in a new worksheet or in an existing worksheet? In our case, we're not dealing with a lot of data, so we're just going to use an existing worksheet. But if you were dealing with data across a number of different cells and columns, you might want to have your pivot table in a new worksheet just to make things manageable. But for us, this should be good. So we're just going to go ahead and click on existing worksheet and tell Excel where it should put the pivot table. So we'll put it on cell L5 and we're going to click OK. All right, so when we pull a bit to the right, we can see that Excel has created this outline for us. This outline sort of tells us roughly where the pivot table is going to be. And really, what determines how our pivot table is going to look like is based on the kind of question you're trying to answer. So for this section, I've created a couple of scenarios that we'll just walk through to give you guys a general idea. So say, for example, that we wanted to see the number of ratings and the number of reviews for each year. What we would want to do is we would just drag the year field name into the rows because we want the years to be in the rows. And we'll drag the number of raters into values, and we'll drag the number of reviews into values as well. We can change the ordering of this by simply just changing the order here, but I'll just leave it how I had it initially. It doesn't really matter. And what can we quickly see from this? Well, as you'll notice, from many of the years, the number of raters are more than the number of reviews. And we can even see this from the grand total. It's a significant difference. And what this basically tells us is that people are more likely to rate a movie, so give it a rating between 0 and 10, or 1 and 10, as opposed to actually writing a review about the movie. And I know that is true about myself, so that's something that's definitely true and definitely accurate, or something we can at least see from the data. So that was a very quick thing that we did. We didn't have to use insane functions in Excel to figure that out. We were able to see it just by creating a pivot table. So the next question, and before we move to that, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So I'm just going to right click on this and click on remove field, right click on this, remove field, right click on this, and remove field. So our next question, what if we want to know the average rating of all the rated movies in each year? Well, we would just need to drag the year field name into rows again, and we would want to drag the rating field name into values. As I mentioned earlier, the ratings range from 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. Really, they don't go past 10. But as you'll notice, we'll see a couple of ratings that are well above. For example, we have a rating of 40.9. Why is this happening? Well, it's because Excel sort of assumed that we would want the sum of these ratings. But in our case, we're looking for the average of the ratings, not the sum. So we can just fix this by clicking any of the values within this column where we have sum of ratings, and we'll just right click and we'll click on value field settings. And this gives us a pop-up which lets us select the aggregation method that we want. For us, we want the average, so we'll go ahead and click on average, and then we'll click on OK. And as you can see, now everything is pretty much less than a value of 10, which is great. So we can see the various average ratings between 1915 and 2020. All right. So what if we wanted to know the average movie rating for each year by the movie maturity rating? So we can actually achieve that using the current setup that we have. All we have to do is we just need to drag this movie maturity rating field name into the columns. And as you can see, we've got different movie maturity ratings: PG-13, R, TV-14, TV, MA. We have null, which just means that it didn't necessarily fall into any category, and so on and so forth. One thing you will notice is we're dealing with a much bigger pivot table, which is a lot harder to look at and make sense of. So what we can do to make it easier on ourselves is we can reduce the number of years that we're analyzing. How are we going to do that? Well, we're just going to click into this year column that is named row labels, but if you look in here, it says it's year. So this is the year column, and we can click anywhere in the year column, and we'll just right click on that, and we'll hover on filter. We'll filter label filters. And as you can see, it says label filter. It tells us which one in parentheses. It's the year column. And we want it to give us anything that's been made in or after 2000. So we'll change this to is greater than or equal to. and we'll set the year to 2000, and we'll click OK. And as you can see, automatically we just have a lot less data to look at, or a lot easier of a pivot table to look at. And as we can see, there's not really much difference in the movie ratings. They generally hover around a rating of 7. So what that tells us is that really maturity ratings might not have an impact on movie ratings. And that's okay. That's something that we've learned. And that's in the world of analytics, knowing what influences something is probably just as important as knowing what does not influence something, and vice versa, right? So it's important to note that there's no specific format that is correct for pivot tables. So for example, I could have had movie maturity rating in here and year in here. You'll just notice that you have to scroll a lot more. And in some cases, that's not a bad thing, but really just for myself, I'd rather not. So I'm just going to hit Command Z, Control Z for the Windows users. I just hit that 2 times and I just switched it back because this is what I would rather work with, right? So that about sums it up for this video. And, feel free to drop any questions or comments or any other topics that you'd like to see us discuss here on the channel. So, don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and or to turn on notifications to see more content like this if you haven't already. So, till next time, guys. Peace out.